Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, here with you with episode 32. We're heading there, man. Eventually this thing's gonna come to an end with our ongoing Space 1999 series, continuing with year 2 with the Rules of Luton. First aired October 13th, 1976, directed by one Val Guest. We have 3 guest stars in this thing, and but first, let's get into the story, I guess. So the moon just kind of comes out of this storm of sorts, and realizing pretty quick there is a world that is not too far from it that seems maybe inhabitable. Maybe they can colonize it. So Koenig and Maya and Tony lead a small minor expedition with just one eagle down to the planet's surface to take a look. Once they've landed and they get down there, of course something goes wrong with the Eagle, right? Something with the oxygen thing. So they got Tony's got to fly the Eagle back to Moonbase Alpha in order to get another one and come back, leaving the two, of course, stranded on a world otherwise seemingly seems peaceful. They're going to find out some really weird stuff about this planet real fast. Once Tony's out of the picture momentarily, they come to find out, well, they realize that this world is pretty much, I mean, it has all of the attributes of Earth seemingly. And so being hungry, they go ahead and take a bite of some of the vegetation, the fruit, whatever. And the minute they pluck that stuff and put it in their mouth, screams, man, screams. And next thing you know, the vegetation is alive and very intellectual based, as we'll see. Maybe a little too much, but so suddenly, you know, Koenig and Maya are under scrutiny by the leaders of Luton, being 3 trees, and how they communicate, how they speak their language, how they can do this being just plant life, even within the realm of science fiction. I'm not sure, but needless to say, Maya and Koenig have a problem, and that is basically they have committed murder on this world, and the only way they're going to get out of it is they have to seek justice via combat, via 3 alien criminals who are also there waiting their due justice for similar acts. Now, immediately Koenig says, this ain't fair. I mean, we're ignorant. We just got down here. I mean, how do we know this stuff? And it don't matter, man. It don't matter. And you know, once you get through the whole thing and get outside the end and look back, it's almost kind of like, this planet sort of gets off on wandering travelers who kind of gives them a reason to see, you know, an arena of sorts, a la Star Trek old episode, and that really does what comes to mind here. First and foremost, I think there are other things in terms of the vegetation, but they do learn pretty quick, like too, that not only is the vegetation alive and seemingly very intellectual in terms of its communication and its ability to cloak their own planet, which is pretty interesting. So when this arena combat will ensue, Moonbase Alpha will momentarily, while this is going on, they'll completely lose Luton right off their radar screen. And so, I mean, so there's, you know, a few things that are happening here that are sort of like, it just don't make sense. But, and the show is said to be maybe the weakest one of all of year 2. Watching it, I find that hard to believe, but I guess, I mean, could be. I mean, I haven't worked my way all the way through it all yet. There are some issues here to get by. Maybe the biggest one is Freiberger's attempt to relive some of the old Star Trek stuff by not being so imaginative anymore in terms of, well, is it him, but, you know, in terms of contrasting year 2 with year 1 and sort of the stepping off that we experience. It's like some of these shows, it's almost kind of like just going back into the Star Trek pool or perhaps other things that he's familiar with and saying, this will make a great story when it's already been done before. But, you know, a lot of these actors are on autopilot, at least till the end of the year 2, and then Space 1990 will be no more, right? And so you got to get what you can get. Now, there are a few things, though, in this episode that are intriguing, that do spark the the imaginative thought process, I guess. Thinking every once in a while, as Koenig and Maya are wandering around, and even in the midst of their combat with these three alien criminals, one being alien strong, the other alien invisible, and one alien transport, hence the attributes. One can just seemingly willfully transport himself anywhere that he wants. The other one can make themselves invisible, and the other one, of course, is just naturally strong. Now, they all look like they've just wandered out of some cave network and from Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes. I'm not sure if I already said that, but I'm still coming off another cold and just my brain's not all where it should be. But one of the things they come across is sort of like bone relic, sort of like, okay, if you've seen Pitch Black, and when they see what they think are trees and no, it's just the remains of all of this wildlife that's been killed off somehow, they come across a similar thing and eventually put one and one together and realize, wait a minute, there was a gargantuan war at some point in this world's past, and it was the vegetation against the animal life, and the vegetation won. And so that in of itself creates something very unique in terms of just thinking what that could have been like. It's interesting. Once Maya and Koenig are pitted against the three alien criminals, they'll try, at least, in the short term, they'll try to communicate, they'll try to do everything they can to avoid fighting, but it's not really going to be possible because these three criminals want their lives, and so they know the only way they're going to get their lives is if they kill Koenig and Maya. And so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but, one by one, I think alien transport is the first one to go. Maya turns herself into this tiger and sort of pounces him back into the river. We find that they really can't travel through the river very well. They'll drown, they can't swim well. And this is at least an early advantage to Maya and Koenig. The other one, I think, she turns into a dog and scares him or something, and he falls off a cliff or something to his death, and that leaves alien strong. But by that point, Koenig's been injured pretty bad, and Maya, having turned into a bird, will be captured by alien strong, and he'll hold her in a cage. Now we know she only has an hour right before she has to retransform, and this is one moment I just don't understand, and if somebody does, they can put it down below. Koenig's worried that if she doesn't get released out of that, and it's just wire meshing, that in her transformational mutation, whatever, she's going to get crushed. Now, how does that work exactly? Because you would think that as she grew bigger, she would just bust through the wire meshing like it's nothing. So I'm not sure how all that works, but it does play into the tension and then trying to race towards some finality in order to save her at the nick of time. But it does offer a kind of a question, right? And then finally, just like Arena, and it really just how it ends, almost just like Arena, you got Koenig and Alien Strong going at it, while Maya just sort of stands off to the side. Or no, she's still in the cage, and then Koenig's got to get her out of that thing. But there are two really, three things that are interesting. One, this is an interesting, we get to see Koenig and Maya really share an episode together. So really that's kind of interesting. But there are two conversational pieces that happen in the midst of the show that are very interesting. One, Maya explains, and I think this is the first time we're ever learning this, that back on Psychon, her home world that we first are introduced to in episode 1 of year 2, she talks about how there was a moment when things were starting to go really bad for her planet, that her brother took about 1,000 Psychons and they basically fled the world, but her dad refused. Ultimately because his wife's grave was on that planet and he wasn't going to leave her. And so his mission, regardless of how he went about it, which we saw in episode 1, his mission was to restore the world so that he could leave her grave, or her grave could remain untouched. And so it's an interesting moment of recollection for her in giving that up to John. John similarly gives her an interesting conversational piece, which goes some distance in explaining his attachment to his romance with Helena. And that is, apparently in 1987, there was World War III. Now this is Freiberg, producer for year 2, really screwing up with the continuity, I think, of the show, without thinking or without caring, too much about it. But apparently World War III happens, and out of that cataclysm comes this renewed effort of humanity to join forces for the benefit of all, which is all nice, fine, and dandy. But when you consider that the moon's base moon base Alpha is up there in 1999 and the years leading up, it just seems like if this war just came out of a cataclysmic world war, it doesn't give very much time to get from that point to 99, because the world you're introduced to, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't really make sense. But an interesting plot point is apparently his wife died as a result of that war, and Maya asks him, have you ever met anyone that reminds you of her? And of course his answer is Helena. Therefore, there you kind of understand his motivation towards that romance. And so, I mean, it moves to disrupt the continuity quite a bit. It just doesn't make sense. Just like an earlier episode didn't make sense in terms of blaming everything on the environmental conditions and not the fact that the moon was ripped out of its orbit. So you're going to have this, I guess, with Freiberg. And so, but the two conversational pieces there in the middle do serve to let us see a little bit further inside both these characters and understand a few things about them, and in the present time as well. I don't know. I mean, I had a whole bunch of questions here and everything. Sort of not like negative or everything, but sort of critical, kind of like I'm not sure how this. But I think I actually hit some of them anyway. So I don't know. All in all, I mean, it was a good episode. I mean, it was for year 2 standards. This is not year 1 standards. This is now year 2 standards, and year 2 standards on its own merit. This wasn't like the worst show of them all. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think the 2 main conversational pieces in the middle of it save it, because they do offer some. And then, of course, how all this sort of revolves by the end. Yeah, I mean, leans pretty hard into Arena, Star Trek episode. So I think that's enough. I mean, it was all right. An interesting episode. But, I mean, it's every one of these episodes is well worth watching. I mean, even if you don't necessarily go back for round 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, they're worth watching. Definitely. And this one was definitely, it is, in terms of context, remember, I'm a kid, I'm 5, 6 years old. I vaguely remember these on TV. I had the toys and everything. And so this is an interesting show tucked right between Star Trek and Star Wars. And this is sort of the bridge, right, between these 2 worlds. And unfortunately, it is a world that really gets left behind once the Star Wars movies take off. And then eventually, the new cinematic approach to Star Trek will take off. And then all of its, shows and everything that will spring off of those. With Generations and all that. So, Space 1999, unfortunately, it's sort of been left to the dust heap of history, and it's sad. It really would be neat to see this thing renewed somehow, some way. Who knows? But anyways, episode 32, The Rules of Luton, not bad, interesting. Oh, Helena and, John and Maya literally, basically, are able to get off the planet peacefully in the end, simply because of the actions of the 3 leaders, the trees. There's almost literally a revolt of the vegetation, which is, a unique sort of twist towards the end. But not, not the worst thing in the world. It was interesting. Anyways, next up, I don't even know. I don't have my controller. I'm not sure what's up next, actually. Actually, yes, I could tell you, because I follow the book. New Adam, New Eve, directed by Charles Crichton. Another Crichton episode. Looking forward to that. So, New Adam, New Eve. It sounds a little intriguing. We'll see how that one goes. As always, we leave these things off with Go Bills.